Welcome everyone. This is now webinar number 9. One more to go, and we finalize our 10 webinar series of Finding Dory. And after that, I leave you alone, and I'm going sailing myself. This webinar is actually, it was Sue who reminded me a couple of months ago. I say, well, you know, Peter, it's not just about preparing the boat, it's also preparing the crew and preparing yourself so you can actually enjoy the passage. And then at that point, she published a blog post on my blog. And you know, to be honest, after the webinar number 8, I thought, okay, people are going to be a webinar out. But then I reread Sue's blog post again, and I thought, no, I'm not going to leave this alone. I think it's important enough for people to get some inspiration, get some food for thought on preparing the crew. Because preparing the boat is one thing, but if the crew can't enjoy it, or if you can't enjoy it yourself, then I think the passage itself will lose a lot of value. So thanks again, Sue, who is also joining us in our panel today. We have, first of all, as usual, I wanted to remind you during the webinar itself, the presentation part, and where the panel will give their input spiel. Please, as a participant, keep your video and audio muted. During the talk from the different panel members and my presentation part, do put the questions that you have that pop up in your mind in the chat channel, and then we'll go over them in the Q&A part. But please do contribute. Again, for us who organize these webinars, your contribution, your interaction is what is the most rewarding for us. For those who joined Finding Dory, the flotilla recently, what are we again? We're an ad hoc group of yachties, of cruisers, who are preparing to cross the Atlantic east to west in the next season. The flotilla now is a group, we have about 200 members, just over 200 members in our online flotilla. I think a total of about 150 boats at the moment. Soon will probably be bigger than the Ark itself. But we're loosely organized. There's no formality, you know, everybody contributes, and we have a number of WhatsApp chats active. And we have a group on Noforeignland, who is a partner in this flotilla. Helene and Steve have been contributing a lot and helping me a lot behind the scenes in getting people, getting speakers, getting help in there. But we're a very informal, organized group. In the organization of the flotilla and the chats, we also provide webinars like you have one today. Next week is the last webinar that we're going to do, and it's a webinar about sailing a multi-hull, sailing a catamaran, and ocean crossings, and have some really, really interesting speakers also lined up for that. For this webinar, we had a total of 5 people, including myself, but unfortunately Juan Carlos, who was going to provide also one of the introduction preambles, could not join us. He had some local issues he had to deal with, so he will be excused. But we have Linda, Julian, and Sue. You might have met Linda and Julian online in the group that we have. Sue is not part of our current group. She already did her East-West transatlantic, but she was part of the Viking Explorers flotilla that I joined in last year. So we have the preambles from our panel, and then we go into the presentation part, and then we'll have the Q&A session. So without further ado, I want to hand over the microphone to Linda to give us a bit of her inspiration and her experiences. Go ahead, Linda.
Okay. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
Thanks very much for the introduction. Thanks, Peter, for the introduction. I've always wanted to sail, seriously sail across oceans. As a teenager, I read all the books I could find that by people who had made that dream a reality. I cautiously told people I wanted to sail around the world, but in general, they were either skeptical or they thought I was joking. When we were in our 20s, my husband Tony and I left Australia as delivery crew with the skipper and the first mate on a 40-foot South African designed yacht. In the early 1980s, it was pure adventure, and as young adults, we four were fearless. Without an engine or an autopilot, we hand-steered 11,000 nautical miles from Fiji in the Pacific to South Africa. The rudder broke when we were halfway across the Indian Ocean, and yet somehow we made it to Mauritius. The mainsail ripped in half as we rounded Madagascar, and I was fully convinced that it was possible to go to sea in a bathtub. I don't remember ever wearing a safety harness. We rarely used the radio as we had no power except as provided by a little rusted generator on deck, and the sextant was our best friend, remembering this was the early 1980s. At that age, I felt an indescribable satisfaction at being free to travel without being hampered by sovereign boundaries. And in those days, it seemed there were very few rules. Over 18 months, we completed 22,000 nautical miles and promised ourselves that we would go again. So fast forward 40 years to now, our 57-foot steel pilot house yacht Paru found us in Northern Australia. And after some refit work, we left the east coast of Australia in August 22 to sail around the world. We choose to sail with just the two of us, no crew. We are skipper and first mate in equal shares, creating our present and our future. Over these last 22,000 nautical miles, I've had many conversations with reluctant partners, usually women, who feel an obligation to support their partner's dream. Emotions range from uncertainty to outright fear, a lack of knowledge, and sometimes, unfortunately, distrust in the skipper's ability. We've met skippers who have received the final ultimatum: it's me or the boat. And in fact, we saw a large powerboat in the south of France, aptly named She Got the House. So ladies, here are 5 suggestions that I would have as to how to take your place and make your place as a confident, capable first mate or crew. Yes, you are more than the wife of the skipper. Then the magic will happen. So the first thing I'd say is adopt the mindset that successful sailing comes from a partnership in all its forms. Preparing for an ocean passage may feel like mastering a Rubik's Cube, but it need not be. The starting point is clear, logical communication, active physical contributions in line with the procedures you've learned, and a willingness to step up within your physical capabilities and knowledge. I'd say think ahead and be proactive. Accidents happen very quickly. Be prepared to accept and learn from your mistakes. Speak up if you don't understand or have concerns. I could also add that telepathy is a very useful skill. The second thing is really to know your boat. I think understand what you must do for your safety and the safety of others, and do it every single time. Follow clear routine procedures again and again so you can competently fulfill your role and enjoy the satisfaction that comes from a job well done. The third thing I'd say is that at a minimum, learn the basics and lean into your new skill set so you can actively and safely stand your watch. This includes understanding the purpose of all the electronic instruments on board and the data that each provides, so you can interpret and respond to changing situations or know when to call the skipper for support or direction. I'd also say it's really important to learn radio procedures and don't be afraid to use the VHF when necessary. There will be shipping and cargo vessels will cross your path, and there will be times when you need to communicate. Tony and I often laugh at the times when shipping has failed to respond to his male voice, but within nanoseconds are available when I call. Could be because I'm a woman, I don't know. Finally, find a role and a responsibility that is yours, that you enjoy on board. Take charge of that role and that responsibility. If you're a closet mechanic, learn and take on the responsibility of some of the routine maintenance or the navigation, the provisioning, the social media. Ensure the logbook is accurate and up to date. Maintain the inventory of boat spares and provisions. Take on immigration and customs planning or marina bookings. Peter had said that he is part of his brief that he wanted something about magic. And I can say that I think magic can happen because of the choices we make and the actions we take. Ocean sailing is definitely not a sport for a passenger. We're in partnership with the others on board, and together we're in a threesome with our boat. When the crew and the boat are well maintained and contributions, respectful debate and learning are valued, the stage is then set for the magic that happens despite us. The changing sea in the sky, the horizon that morphs into a watercolour painting, the birds that use the aft deck as a hostel room for the night. On Paru, we've heard the ghostly song of migrating humpback whales in the Indian Ocean reverberating through Paru's steel hull. We've circled sleeping turtles, floating silently on a dead calm sea, until they dive when we pass by. The extraordinary seascape and sea mounts below us in the mid-Atlantic ridge between Ascension and Cape Verde make us consider really how little we know about the world below us. And a 45-knot blow certainly reminds us that we're alive. But one incredible thing happened, which really was magic, and that was on the day that Tony's elderly mum passed away in the UK, and we were in the South Atlantic, we were suddenly surrounded by hundreds of dolphins. They started swimming alongside Paru in lines like a guard of honour, and then they stretched out for possibly half a mile towards the horizon, diving and jumping. We were absolutely astonished. It was as if they had paid their respects, and when it was time to go, they simply disappeared. So perhaps overall there is a sense of satisfaction, the magic that comes from reaching a goal that relatively few women achieve. In 2024, 232 yachts passed the Cape of Good Hope as an indication of circumnavigation, and Jimmy Cornell estimates that around 150 to 200 yachts a year complete a circumnavigation. And each year, around 1,500 yachts make the east-west Atlantic crossing, and you and we will be one of those. So I'd like to think my motto is, the more we live our lives, the better we get at it. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you. Thank you, Linda. The experience after, 2 times 22,000 miles. Excellent. Thank you. Thank you very much. Julian, take it away.
Okay. Hi. So my family and I live aboard our boat. We've been cruising for almost 4.5 years now. And last year we crossed the Atlantic west to east with our kids at the time were 8, 11, and 14. And after a year in the Med, we are making our way back to the Caribbean this winter. So I just wanted to talk a little bit about sailing with kids and trying to make it magical for them and for you. Sailing with kids is both amazing and incredibly hard work. And we started out just hopping down the coast, which is the same in the Med, but it's a different beast crossing oceans, because crossing oceans is a beast. You have the physical and mental load is a lot when you're caring for yourself, a partner, a vessel, crew, if you have any. And when you add kids into the mix, it's as if your workload has magnified, I think scientifically, times 10, possibly per kid. But I don't have enough data to back that up yet. So I wanted to share some of the things we did to keep the kids engaged and to make it the best passage that we could for them. Because let's be real, the kids are, not many kids are gung-ho to spend 7 to 14 days at sea with their parents. They're just along for the ride. So starting with, I would like to talk about communication. We opened communication. We talked for months before we crossed about expectations and fears. Every kid feels differently and has different ideas of what it's going to look like and feel like. We practiced safety drills. They practiced inflating their self-inflating life jackets so they would know what that would feel like. How to clip into the jack lines to walk up the deck underway. Hopefully these are things that you've already done, but a refresher is good. Knowledge, I believe that knowledge is power. My youngest in particular, who's 8 at the time, is 9 now, had fears of our boat catching fire or sinking. So we talked through Those are still scary situations, but she knows where all the fire extinguishers are. She knows what hatches she can climb out of, which would be all of them. She knows what order, if we had to get into the life raft, we've talked about what that would look like, and what order we would get into the life raft. They helped us pack the ditch bag, including a small stuffed animal or something small and comforting for each of them, so that is so that they would have that, as well as, you know, a deck of cards and a notebook, and for playing silly games if God forbid we had to be in the life raft, which are things that maybe you don't think about when it's just adults and you're like, we just have to survive. But yeah, but the mental part is a lot, and obviously that's not very magical, but is important for any passage, any big passage. Our biggest complaints while crossing last year were probably, I did not keep track, but boredom, feeling wiggly and antsy, needing to move bodies, and a lack of internet. We did have Starlink on board, and we kept it to keep, we turned it on to keep in touch, excuse me, with our weather router, and also to text message with friends and family. But we did not stream things. We're on a budget. That was like, there was no online presence for the kids. So they had pre-downloaded movies and audiobooks and podcasts, but they were strictly offline. And for our west to east passage was 3 legs. And obviously we didn't want to just hand them a tablet and let them be free on their tablet for the whole time. We did at times, because obviously we were all tired at some point and everyone needs a break. But in an effort to make it memorable in a positive way, we wanted to engage them. I imagine all kids are this way, but my kids especially love new and novel. My youngest absolutely craves new stimulus, which, as you can imagine, is hard on a sailboat. She was 4 when the pandemic hit and we were still on land, and she would come downstairs every morning and say, Mama, what are we doing today? And I would list out all the things we were doing, which were the things we did every day in the house and in the backyard. And then she would just be really sad because there were no new people and no new things to do. And she is still like that. So she has thought a lot about how to keep her, in particular, not just appeased, but in I keep using the word engaged, but engaged and happy on the passage. I did buy a few things before our big passage, and they're fairly little. I bought some art supplies that were special just for on passage. So like a I don't know if you can see, but a pretty coloring book, a couple new art supplies, clay or colored pencils. We had some fidget toys. I can't find one of them, but we got these magnetic cubes that they pull them apart, and they just they played with them for hours and hours. They still do. But it just, like, especially early days on passage when people are still getting their sea legs, we spend a lot of time in the cockpit because that's just where the motion is the easiest. We have we're on a monohull. It's the center cockpit. So keeping hands busy, listening to music together, to audiobooks and podcasts together. There are some great audio productions that exist for kids, and not everything was necessarily made for kids. We did some science podcasts or history podcasts, just trying to sneak in a little bit of like education, but other fidgety things, tying knots together, crochet, making the embroidery thread bracelets or jewelry, origami, painting if you have stones or shells on board, painting things if conditions are right. We did do some little gifts last year. We aren't doing that this year, but we had like a little Lego gift for each kid for leg 1, and then like a arts and crafts thing for leg 2, kind of thing like that. And we don't give it to them right away. Like 3 days in, when the novelty of actually being underway wears off, well, let's pull something out. Like let's stimulate your brain in another way. Obviously, we did a lot of stargazing and looking for dolphins and whales, but there's a lot of downtime. There's just a lot of downtime. So keeping everybody kind of occupied and their brains tingling is important for everyone to be happy. We do a lot of baking from scratch on our boat, bread and cakes and cookies. But I bought some pre-made mixes of cakes and cookies, because we did halfway cakes. So each leg, we calculated out what the halfway mileage would be. We did mileage versus days because our weather was going west to east was inconsistent. And the mixes are great because the kids can do it themselves. They didn't have to pull out all the bins of flour and sugar, right, to make a mess in the galley while the boat is moving. I bought this brioche mix from the Super U in St. Martin, and I didn't realize the instructions required a mixer, so it needed like 15 minutes of mixing to really like activate the gluten and make the dough brioche-like. I don't know. So we just had our hand whisk, and we just had to take turns in the cockpit with a big mixing bowl and taking turns in like. So then I timed them, like who can do it the longest and who can go the fastest. And, it's silly things like that, but trying to keep everybody doing new things. So, and it was really delicious. It wasn't the right texture like a professional brioche, but it was quite delicious. Let's see. I talked about, books and podcasts and music. We have a playlist of movie tunes, Disney tunes, musicals, and we play a game. We shuffle it and have a little Bluetooth speaker in the cockpit, and then they have to guess. I'm sorry, I just lost my train of thought. They have to guess what movie it's from. So we spend hours guessing what movie the song is from and who can be first to guess it. Look ahead. I looked ahead to holidays of when we might be underway. We thought we would be underway for America's Independence Day, so I made sure we had our Broadway musical Hamilton downloaded and some U.S. history as trivia to ask and play. We do a lot of trivia questions. I happen to have some decks of trivia we have Harry Potter, and we have constellations, and we have maritime history. And obviously you don't have to buy these things. You could look it up online or download it off the internet in advance, but having things, and a lot of it will spark discussion. And, like we have, so sparking discussion, keeping brains activated. Kids love celebrations. So how many celebrations can you do? Not only did we do halfway, but we celebrated every 1,000 nautical miles. And that might just be make cookies or open a package of cookies. But something like, let's do a dance party. Can you track degrees of latitude or longitude as you're crossing and do a celebration? It doesn't have to be, not everything has to be huge, but again, you're looking for novel, you're looking to break up the monotony of a long passage. Not only real holidays, but silly holidays. Can you make one day that's talk like a pirate or talk with the British or Aussie accent? One of my kids has really good British friends, so they like to practice that British accent. So can we do a whole day where we talk like that, or an afternoon? Let's see, astronomy, stargazing. We had amazing skies. We had not only all the Starlink satellites in the sky, but we had shooting stars. We had Jupiter following our path every night. So every night I would get on night watch and Jupiter would be like tracking us across the ocean. So, and I find that really magical. So, and bringing that magic, talking about it with the kids, even if they're like, yeah, whatever, mom, like at least it's like you're sharing your joy with them, right? Kids also love challenges, exercise challenges. We have a small center cockpit, but we can do push-ups against the combing, and we can hang from the hatch, the companionway hatch, to do pull-ups, or stepping in place. I don't know. But also they play Minecraft. So a Minecraft building competition, I would come up with who can build the tallest tower or the biggest bridge, or I don't even know what's in Minecraft sometimes, but and then you give them, and now you have 20 minutes, like what can you build? And then bring it back and show me a Lego build competition, a drawing challenge. We did like an interpretive drawing. So you have a piece of paper and you set a timer for 20 seconds and somebody draws for 20, well, probably more like 5 to 10 seconds. And then you pass the paper and someone has to continue and see what you can come up with. A card game competition, track, a lot of tracking. Who can win Uno or Yahtzee, which is not a card game, or Rummy the most over periods of time. We love games, tabletop games, and movement on the boat doesn't always allow us to set up pieces. So cards and dice, something that's really simple. It's not their favorite game, but it is what it is. We also had a running gag of, if you can make up a joke and make a parent laugh, you get a piece of candy on the spot as a reward. I made a bingo chart of what we might see, types of birds and sea creatures, freighter ships, flotsam and jetsam. Like, what do you think you're going to see on this passage, and make a bingo card, and they can cross it off, get a prize. I don't know. Is it an extra cookie? Do you get to skip washing the dishes that night? Who knows? Now, despite health initiatives and our health initiatives, I'm going to say that sugar makes everything a little bit better. Having a stash of candy or a stash of cookies that you can pull out if it's been a crappy weather day. Nobody wants to go down and bake, but we just need a pick me up, like a little bit of sugar, or whatever the treat is. It just feels more special and magical when you've been underway for days at a time. And so moving on, working to engage them, to give them jobs, assign them roles, because really, like, they don't, I don't know, my kids are so used to the boat, but they still are like, it's day 5, it's day 7. Our longest stretch was from Bermuda to Azores. It was 14 days. They're like, it's been 10 days. We don't really want to do anything like that. We're over this, but let's log things. Let's log the air and water temperature. Let's log the birds we've seen, or the creatures we've seen, or where we are in the cycle of the moon. Let's make a journal or notebook of what we've done every day. You're the captain, standing watch in the afternoon. The youngest two, I would pair them together and they would stand watches, and I would probably just lay down in the cockpit. But make them be in charge. Check the wind, check the sails. Do we need to trim? I talked about clipping into the jack lines to walk up deck. So when we had good weather, the boat was fairly stable. We definitely went up deck, especially when we saw whales and dolphins. Everybody was up on deck. Again, practice tying knots. Yes, we all still have to eat, help make a meal, make the snacks. We have one titled job that is snack master. And when you are snack master, it's a really big deal. And it's your job to come up with the snacks and to go get the snacks if they're down below, or make them. And they get really into it. I mean, not necessarily every time, but it's an important role. My oldest does stand watch by himself, not necessarily at night, or if it's at night, someone is in the cockpit with them just laying down. But they do stand watches with supervision, at least. And another way to get engaged, research destinations. If you already have guidebooks, or download some information for them to read about, you're about to visit the Caribbean. There's a dozen islands, keep them busy, keep them engaged, make their brain tingle with ideas of what they're going to do, get them excited about what's coming, give them ownership on your adventure. What are the volcanoes that you're going to hike? Where are the hot springs you're going to visit? They're in Guadeloupe. What is the history of the islands? There's former British colonies, and then you've got the French overseas territories, and then the US territories. So, talk about the history, what's going on there. You're going to learn a lot about slavery and the slavery trade, but they could do some pre-research. When did the volcanoes explode? Could they draw a map? Because some of them have been pretty recent. And then I took this from another person of having a captain's hour in the evening, because I hadn't heard that before, and like a sunsetish evening meal, where everyone kind of gathers. And we didn't always do it, because sometimes it was just my husband and I. We didn't take crew, so one of us would be sleeping. But if we were both awake, we would gather, we would talk about the weather plan, and we would talk about what happened, make up conversation because it gets monotonous. And on good weather, good, easy sailing days, we would pull out instruments. We have a couple ukuleles and guitar, a bucket for a drum. And we didn't, like I said, we didn't do it every night, but my oldest still talks about those evenings and is one of the things that he is looking forward to doing again while we're on passage. So, and then Peter and I talked, and we talked about how to make it magical for us as the parents. And that's really hard because it is a lot of work, but I think it's worth it. In most households, one parent tends to be like the main kid parent. For us, it's me. It's very that stereotypical, like the kid walks right past the dad to search me out in whatever cubby I'm in to ask me where their shoes are or to ask me what's for dinner, right? Even though he's perfectly capable and he's standing right there. And that's that open communication between partners and with the kids, like, hey, I need a break. I'm off watch. I'm going to go lay down, or I'm going to listen to my audiobook. I have a really great partner who's super willing to take over cooking meals or help with kid things. So it evens out a bit over time. On night watches, I really like to be alone. I like to have my thoughts and my audiobook or podcasts and look at the stars and do my thing, but he'll wake up the kids to engage them, like, come look at these stars, or come help me, I need help with something. But I'm hands off at night. Like that's my time to kind of decompress. And I do get overstimulated. So especially with a lot of noise. So those, like the books and music in the cockpit, we do that a lot, but sometimes it's a nope. Like, I need a break. Everyone's going to do their own thing. That's when those individual screens are good. Go watch a movie together, or go play a video game by yourself, or go do your own thing. Let me have a couple hours to myself. So I hope that I'm not making it think like you have to be on parenting 24/7. I mean, you are, but like, we definitely have downtime. But at the same time, I'm still working really hard to make it good for them so that they aren't just bored and just looking at a screen the whole time. When I asked my kids what their favorite parts of our Atlantic passage were, hands down, it was dolphins. We had a sperm whale that was like resting at the surface, and then it trailed us for a bit. And those are moments that were so incredibly magical. But unfortunately, we can't command dolphins to visit us and whales to breach. So we work really hard to create our own fun and our own magic, knowing that if we're having an open mindset, we're being curious, we're looking around us, and keeping our eyes and minds and hearts open, primed, that we'll find the magic, that the magic will find us. And my mentor always says that misery is optional. So I try to keep that in mind for myself, and I do quote that to my kids. So I hope this was helpful. It is a challenge, and I think that the rewards are definitely worth it. We're doing it again. My kids are really proud of their crossing. They've gathered a lot of skills, and as they've met new boat kids here in the Med over the last year, they've met some great friends, but they can see the difference of kids who haven't done as much sailing yet, where they are like, I don't know, I don't like that, more of that anxiety, or we have to do it overnight, and what a big deal that is. And to them, like, that's not a big deal now. It's like easy peasy. So, and I think that as a family and a crew, we operate better together, but we work to make it better. So that's all I've got. But I'm happy to answer questions at the end, and I'm happy to share resources for books and podcasts, knowing that they all are in English. So thank you.
Very good, Julian. Thank you. Knowing that there are many people in our flotilla with kids on board, I hope they can get some inspiration from your take-home messages sailing with the kids, especially in the passage. Thanks again, Julian. Sue Sagar, you and me have sailed across the ocean virtually together, or physically together.
Side by side.
Side by side. Go ahead, Sue.
Thank you. Hello, everyone. And hi, Brian and Kelly. We'll chat to you later. I consider myself, or I did consider myself, to be a very resilient person. I worked in as a marketing and communications events manager for big events. And unlike Linda, I never dreamt, and Gillian never dreamt of sailing the world. I actually did take this on. I didn't want my husband to regret not ever buying a boat when he turned 80. So I said, okay, what have we got to lose? Let's give it a go. First of all, we started on a monohull in Australia for 2 years, and then we found ourselves on a catamaran in Greece. And the plan is obviously to sail it back to Australia. We spent 1.5 years in the Med and then made our way to join the Viking Explorers to cross with last January. Of course, YouTube was my expectation, and I'm going to show a different side, I think, because honestly, I did struggle with the crossing, and my expectation was all from YouTube, really. The variety in the weather. Of course, I knew there'd be squalls. Wasn't scared of that. I thought I'd be able to do yoga, baking, play games, all of those things you imagine you can do while you're crossing. And on the dock in Mindelo, as we left, a friend hugged me, and she was teary. We were emotional, and I said, "It's okay, we've got this." But little did we know what this was. So our reality was we had constant 20 plus winds, 20 nautic, not winds. We had 3 to 4 metre waves, but with a short wave period, and squalls that started well before halfway. So while I was never thought I was going to die, I had complete faith in the boat and our crew. We had 2 additional crew members on board, which was terrific. I did struggle, and I did halfway or so, I did an Instagram post that has since gotten 2.2 million views. It was a tongue-in-cheek look at how to prepare before you leave the house. So things like bash into your bench tops, the corners of your tables, and get yourself a bruise count of 5 or higher. Always walk around your house holding on. Lock yourself into a small space for over 2 weeks. Wake up in the middle of the night, sit yourself in front of a screen staring at numbers for a couple of hours, and then go back to bed. So all these sort of funny things. But it did lead me to think that we spent so much time preparing the boat, all the redundancies, all the spares, all the provisions. But I didn't actually think about how I would cope with that constant movement. I was overstimulated, basically, is what it came down to. So if you've ever been, those of you who are on a catamaran, if you've never heard the slamming that can happen under your hull, it is so loud, and it just vibrates the whole boat. And whilst, like I said, I wasn't scared I was going to die, it just jolts you every time. The water rushing and the wind, sound, and the movement, which is always amplified at night for some reason, I just got to a point where I needed to make it stop. And not even my noise-cancelling headsets, my all the things I'd prepared, I had quotes, I had all sorts of things ready. I just got myself into quite a deep spot because I felt like I'd failed. And that to me was the part that really hurt, because when we arrived, my magical moment was when we arrived and we all jumped in the water in the marina together, and that was just beautiful. But sadly, that was my magical moment. I felt, everyone said, you must be so proud, and I felt like a failure because I struggled just to do the daily tasks. I did keep cooking, I did keep doing my part, but it was a struggle. So like I said, I'm not here to scare you. I have signed up with my husband to do the Pacific crossing this coming February. So, Gillian said before, it's a bit like childbirth, and I think it might be. I'm going back for it again. But what would I do differently, or what was good that we did do? With our group, we started a WhatsApp group, which was more about provisioning to start with, things like where do you get fish sauce and all that sort of stuff in Las Palmas. And that morphed into a support group. And as we were crossing, we would send daily funny memes. We could chat. We could go, how are you going, on a more personal level, rather than the big group that was talking about performance and that sort of thing. I found that was really good. I personally will do a lot more positive self-talk on the Pacific, and I'm hoping there's some variety in the crossing, that we do get some calm days where we can have a swim. Not too many, my husband says, but there'll be some variety. So my self-talk, will be, this will end. I'm relaxed. It's going to be okay. I'm going to have more meals prepared, complete meals prepared. So if it does get bad and I am not coping so well, it'll be easier to just pull out. My expectation was I'll be able to cook and it'll give me something to do in the day. But when that fell apart, it was obviously harder to prepare meals. I am going to make myself stop and appreciate the extraordinary thing that I am doing. Before we left, Peter sent around a quote to us, which I should have taken more time to actually digest, but of course I was just so caught up in prepping everything else. And I'm going to share it with you now. And one thing I am going to do for our next crossing is write it out and have it on display here in the boat. And I'm going to read it every day, a few times a day probably. So it goes like this. He said, "It will be tough. You will lack sleep. The environment will be harsh. You might get sick or highly uncomfortable. You will at times come to thoughts of, why did I decide to do this? Many times. But unless in the midst of the hard times you stop for a moment and you look around and take in where you are, the extraordinary thing you are doing at that very moment, it will all be over before you know it. And when it is over, unless you stop to enjoy the pain and hardship forever, you will regret that you did not enjoy that moment of extraordinary." I certainly do regret not making myself appreciate that. Doing that with few other people in the world who are also privileged to share this adventure and experience this. So enjoy the moment, no matter how tough it is. Enjoy the extraordinary adventure you are embarking on. So, like I said, I'm going to read that to myself every day as my self-talk. And then one final note, I'm going to give you a tip for the caravan if you haven't been here before. In Las Palmas, food is cheaper. Everything is cheaper. Over here, things are expensive. Stock up, provision, and then get more. So we have 13 kilos of coffee left over, coffee beans, which has been great. But otherwise, I wish I had have really filled the boat with tins and food and staples, because it is expensive over here. Yeah. And the other tip I'll give you for when you get to the smaller islands over here is keep an egg carton, because they give you, you buy your eggs individually and they give them to you in a plastic bag. So imagine getting back to the boat with that. And that's my takeaway tip for you. Enjoy and have a great passage. I'm sure you will. Thank you.
Very good. Thanks, Sue. Thanks for sharing the experience, and I really hope that in the Pacific crossing, the upcoming Pacific crossing, you can really enjoy it more. And I hope that we can talk after your Pacific crossing and you write a new blog post. How I gave birth to my second child. All right.
Thanks,
Very
Peter.
good. Very good. Thanks so much. Let me go to my slides here. In the things I'm going to talk to you about now, I'm of course biased through my own personal experiences and my professional experiences. I have to say, I always sailed with guest crew. So I have limited experience in shorthand. I did a couple of shorthanded passages, but not many. And I sailed with my own kids as a cruiser, but never done a passage with my kids. But I did one passage with my daughter, but by that time she was already 29 years old. So I don't think it really qualifies to the same experience as Julian has shared with us. Now, in terms of my bias, I have two biases. One is on safety. I worked for 30 years as a humanitarian. Most of the work that we did was in war areas, in areas of trouble, be it flooding, earthquakes, natural disasters, internal turmoil. And that's also where Sammy, who is joining us in this webinar, and has been working in our webinars behind the scenes to keep all of you guys muted and moderate the questions, have been working together. Picture from Afghanistan. This is Kosovo back in '99. So that was my life for 30 years. And as such, I was for many years the head of the UN Fast Intervention Team. So we would always fly out the moment that there was an onset of an emergency, and most of them were wars. Beyond that, I did also 4 expeditions, 2 of them in the Antarctic. One was as co-organizer, one was as co-expedition leader. So that also built my bias, what I'm going to talk to you about in terms of team dynamics and my profound sensitivity on anything which is related to safety. In the team bias, in the emergencies, we always worked with large crews. This is the crew that we had for the emergency response after the Haiti earthquake back in 2010. I also have a bias in terms of guest crew. As I said, I always worked, I was always guest crew. I don't own a boat, so I always guest crewed on another boat. And on the boats that we crewed, we had either, just me as a guest crew. Most of the time we had 2, 3 other guest crews. In some of the boats that we sail, we have 10, 11, 12 guest crew on board. So this is the bias that I have, in which I will share my experiences. Why do I do open ocean crossings? For me, with the type of work that I had, it was a way to tune out. So over the years, I always took a break. I took a sabbatical, and I did an ocean crossing, which was a way for me to reground, a way to get away from the permanent pressure of being on call and flying off in different countries. Over the years, I worked in 168 different countries, I think. So that pressure builds. And for me, it was a way to relax and to go back again to the roots. And for me, there is nothing better than just be in the middle of absolutely nowhere and just look at the ocean. We'll talk about, do you get bored or not? For me, I never get bored at looking at the ocean. I never get bored at looking at the sunrises and the sunsets, which are for me the absolute magical moments in the day. And there is nothing compared to watching a sunset and a sunrise, or a moonrise and a moonset from a boat. This is a picture, actually this is not a sun, this is a picture taken in the middle of the night with a full moon. I think maybe the iPhone enhanced it a little bit, but I certainly didn't enhance it. But sometimes the moon is so bright that you can look at the ocean almost like it would be in the middle of the day. Maybe not that bright, but it's just absolutely magical. And then if you have nights without the moon, where it's really pitch dark and you're just in this amazing sky of stars, seeing the ISS, the International Space Station, flying over, seeing the planets. I have a little app where I look at the planets and say, oh, there's Jupiter there, there's Mercury there, there's Venus there. Okay, I have 2 more minutes before the moon is setting. Let me watch the moon setting. For me, that's why I do crossings. Now, from my experience on why I do crossings and my bias, let's go more in some of the messages I want to bring. For me, one of the most important ones is to match expectations. Again, this is when we sail with our families, but definitely when we sail with guest crew. Have a talk, sit down, and make sure that the skipper explains what he expects from the crew and what the crew expects from the passage. And have an open discussion about this. If you don't have matching expectations, it might come to somewhere, maybe not a conflict, but somewhere like a friction in terms of I had no clue that this is the tasks that you wanted me to do. This is what you thought were the priorities. This is what you expected in terms of safety of the crew, etc., etc. Now, for me, in terms of expectations, goal number one is to move the boat safely from A to B. And there is no other goal that goes above that. So move the boat from A to B with the least wear and tear on the boat and with a safe and healthy and happy crew. The second goal is to have fun, to make sure that the crew can enjoy the magic of this unique experience, enjoy the moment, even though it might be tough. But goal number two is lower priority than goal number one. Goal number one is definitely move safely the boat. Now, again, I refer to something that Sue has said. No matter how well and how long you prepare the boat, if the crew doesn't click, if the crew is not happy, it will be very difficult to enjoy the passage. Now, in terms of expectations, also make sure that all of the people on the boat, all of the crew agrees on the role of the skipper and the first mate. For me, there's only one skipper on the boat. He or she makes the final calls. There can be input from the rest of the crew, but he or she makes the final call. But also agree on the role of the first mate. Typically for me, the first mate is more the operations manager of the boat. He or she, who is the first mate, typically takes care of the crew management, takes care of the daily operations on the boat, make sure that they manage the crew itself. Of course, when we talk on passage, and again, this comes down to my safety bias, safety and basic safety on board is an absolute must. So for me, it is really important before you leave, brief the crew on the onboard safety. And I think also Gillian talked about this when she briefed the kids. The basic safety equipment, fire extinguishers, fire blankets, cut-off switches, the life raft, the EPIRB, the medical kit. Probably we can also include the grab bag, etc., etc. Make sure that the crew is properly briefed, because we always have to think in terms of plan for the worst and hope for the best. Plan for the worst is maybe the skipper will be disabled. Does all of the crew know where, if the skipper is disabled, where all of the pieces of critical equipment is? Agree on the basic safety rules on board, and we'll come back to that later. Also give a brief, and there's also part of safety for me, but also the operations of the boat. Brief the crew on the basic navigation equipment and the autopilot, and do a boat tour. I've been on a number of boats as guest tour, and the skipper and maybe his family have been on the boat for many years already, and for them it's all obvious. But as a guest crew coming in, this boat is new for you. So take the proper time to do a proper boat tour. Go over the standing rigging, the running rigging, the operations of the basic navigation equipment, the radio, etc., etc. And then also as a skipper, make sure that you know any eventual medical conditions of the crew. What medications do they have? What allergies do they have? God forbid that something would happen, that you know what medications that the crew is taking. Going on to the basic safety rules. There's three main rules. The first rule is don't fall overboard. The second rule is don't fall overboard. The rule number 3 is don't fall overboard. God forbid, I trained a lot crew and people on person overboard, man overboard. But I've been very blessed so far that I never had a real man overboard situation. But I can share you one experience. Once we were sailing with the family, the kids were still small, a couple of years ago, I think it's 20 years ago, in the Seychelles. It was a beautiful day. We were going, I think, from the main island to Presland, so it's a couple of hours sail. We dragged the dinghy behind us. It was a fast sail. We had good wind, like perfect 70 degrees apparent wind angle. We go really, really fast. And at a certain moment, my youngest daughter says, "Daddy, look behind you. The dinghy is in the air." When I look behind me, the dinghy, which was a big one, it was like a 4.5 meters, 5 meters dinghy with a wide hull, a big thing. And we were going that fast that the dinghy actually went up in the air, turned around, fell back into the sea, and then because of the pressure, the dinghy was going underwater and broke the painter and broke it off, and the dinghy was gone. Now, this was a 4.5 meter, 5 meter dinghy with a wide hull. And I can tell you, in just 5 minutes, we lost complete sight of the dinghy. Now we can imagine what it would be to spot a person, even during daylight. It was broad daylight when we lost the dinghy. Even if during daylight, you would need to recover and spot and keep spotting a person which goes overboard. God forbid it will never have to happen. But also agree then, even if you can spot a man overboard, a person overboard, make sure that you agree with the crew what are the procedures to follow. You know, for us, we always have a foghorn on deck. So we just blow the foghorn down into the galley, into the main saloon. We call all hands on deck. We agree how we will maneuver. Will we take the time to drop the sails, or we just ease off the sails? How we will get the person back on board? Because it's not just, even if you spot the person, and even if you can get back again to the person overboard, it is not that easy to get the person back on board. Certainly not if that person has been hurt when they fell overboard and is unconscious. So agree on forehand. Agree on personal safety, the use of personal flotation devices, the life jacket, an MOB beacon or a PLB beacon. Now I think the technology is there and it becomes reasonably affordable. So I would definitely advise the use of a PFB with an MOB beacon included. That gives off an alarm signal, is automatically deployed when the PFD inflates, and then gives an IS signal on the plotters of a man overboard. But then overnight, we typically also use a PLB beacon, a personal PLB beacon, which gives off a signal via the satellite to an agreed coastal rescue service. Agree on when to clip on. We'll come back to that later. You know, we all have safety harnesses. When do we clip on? When do we have to clip on? What are the options to clip on? But definitely in terms of night sailing, make clear rules on the boat. For us, night sailing, the moment the sun sets until the sun is rising, we all have, if you're on deck, even in the cockpit, PFD is on. The moment that during the night we have to work on the bow or come out of the cockpit, there always have to be 2 people on deck, one in the cockpit and the one that does the work on the bow, or multiple people on the bow. When you're on watch, on single watches, never leave the cockpit. That's our agreement. Never leave the cockpit and work on the bow. You know, some people have done crossings with some people who thought it was a good idea in the middle of the night just to sit on the bow and look at the stars. So you don't leave the cockpit. Also agree during night sailing. If sail changes need to happen, but who will you call on deck and how will you do it? Again, during night sailing, we all have head torches, and typically on the boats that we sail, we use red light only to make sure that we don't blind ourselves in the ability of seeing the environment. Also, in terms of personal safety, cooking, maybe not something that people typically relate to safety, but when we start cooking, we work with, typically with gas cooking. We work with warm stuff, with cooking water, with the boiling water, and while the boat is moving. So make sure that the crew is well aware when you cook that you stay properly safe and you don't hurt yourself. All right. Again, something that you might agree, again, coming from my bias in working with guest crew, make sure that we agree, are we running a dry boat? This means no alcohol during the whole passage. Or in some boats, we have a sunset drink, no hard liquor, but we have a beer or a glass of wine with all of the crew having a sunset. I don't have preference one way or the other, but it's make sure there is a clear agreement. Also, before we start a passage, we always make the agreement with the crew is no heavy partying the night before a passage. Before we start a passage, we want to be everybody on their full alert. And of course, no drugs. If there are smokers in the crew, let's agree on how to smoke and what to do with the ashes and the cigarette butts, etc., etc. So smoke downwind. If somebody somewhere still gets bothered by the smoke, they have to be able to speak up and tell the smoker that it's bothering. But agree on it, because again, during a passage, gradually fuses get a little bit shorter, and it doesn't always take a lot of issues to make it a big issue while on passage. Watches. We can have probably 5 different webinars on watches. There are many variants, depending on the amount of crew you have on board. If you go short-handed, if you have, it also depends on the experience of the different crew. In some of the passages we had very experienced crews, so we had single watches. Some of the passages we had rather unexperienced crew, so we would match up a person who has the experience with an inexperienced person, so we have multi-watches. In some of the bigger boats that we sail with 4 or 5 people on watch. So it depends on the amount of people they have on board and their experience. You can have floating or rotating watches or fixed times. So fixed times is everybody has a fixed schedule. They always have the midnight to 4 and the 8 in the evening until midnight, something. But agree on that on forehand. And for me, it's important that the watches are agreed on forehand, so people again match their expectations, match what they're up against, the challenge that they're up against, and agree with the crew. There's a big difference whether you do 2 hours on and 2 hours off, or 2 hours on, 4 hours off, or 4 hours on and 8 hours off, and make sure that you agree on forehand. Also, integrate in there the cooking. I will come back to that a little bit later. You know, in some of the watch systems that we had a mother watch. So there is one person on or one watch team that is doing the cooking during a day, and they're taken out of the sail duties for that day. We put all of this on a nice sheet. We stick it a schedule on the wall. Now, again, agree with the crew. What is the role of a watch? How to keep a good watch? For me, having somebody on watch means that you use your ears, your eyes, and your feeling. You look at the boat, you look at your environment, you look at anything which is unusual, be it at sea or be it on the boat. Do you see something which is flapping, which typically isn't flapping? Do you hear something on the boat? Do you hear some noise? Maybe something is banging. Maybe we have some cans of beer in the bilge that are, you know, moving around, something that wasn't there for the past days, and maybe we need to intervene. Maybe it is just the door. Maybe we have something on deck that is not right, and during the night you can't really see. But also use your feeling. If the boat feels different than what you used to feel, then typically there is something that is wrong. At least analyze what is the difference. For me, a good watch is always at the helm or near the helm, is in full control of the boat. And also what is important, again, we're talking about fuses getting short. Some of the conflicts I've seen on boats is simply because people don't come on time for the watch. You know, especially you have longer watches. I like those 4 hours watches, and then, you know, 4 hours off or 8 hours off. But it's frustrating if you're on watch, especially if it is a rough night and you don't feel that well yourself, you're tired. You know, if, okay, we have 1 minute to go, 30 seconds to go before the watch schedule, and then they come up on deck, you know, 10 minutes late or 15 minutes late. Be on time. I would also advise to use a buddy system if you have multiple crew on board. So if sail changes need to be done, you call up your buddy. But also, you know, what if it is not your day? Not everybody is always feeling 100% during the passage. Even myself, I might have an off day or might be tired. I didn't sleep well the night before or something. You know, call on your buddy. ask your buddy to take over your watch, but clearly agree that the buddy is then taking over your watch. But also agree on when to call on the skipper. And I think it's really, really important. Whether it's guest crew or sailing with your family, I think it's really important that the skipper also has his or her sleep. And one of the reasons why often skippers don't sleep well during passages is because they don't feel confident that they will be woken up. And it's simple as that. So agree with the crew, be it your family or be it guest crew, when the skipper will be called upon. And to me, there is never a reason too little to call a skipper. Whether it is, you're passing traffic and you're not too sure how to pass that traffic, you don't feel confident depending on your experience, or it looks like there's weather coming up, or I hear something is moving up on the foredeck. I will call my buddy to look at it, and then we see there is something happening with the further. Call on the skipper. I've never seen a skipper being angry when he is being woken up. I've seen a lot of skippers angry when they were not called upon when there was an issue. In watches, also do a proper handover. New watches coming on deck, give them a short brief of the weather, what you've seen in your shift, of the traffic, any upcoming traffic or traffic that we have just passed, the overall sea state, the overall boat configuration, the sailing configuration. And also, again, we're talking about fuses getting a little bit shorter. Coming on watch, it's a bit frustrating when all of the wraps of the candy that people have used in the previous watch or is still laying around or floating around. We have dirty dishes in there or spilled drinks or food. After your watch, clean up the cockpit before you hand it over. I don't also agree on logbooks, and there will be a question on this later on. Fill in the logbook, note down issues, so when the skipper wakes up, we can look at the logbook and see, over the night, what the wind has done, what the sea state was, eventually what boats that we have crossed, but also note down that any possible issues that you've seen on the boat itself. Another thing to agree on, proximity to other vessels. Agree on forehand how with the boat the crew will pass other vessels. This is biased on my experience, but typically we agree that we will pass minimum in open waters 1 nautical mile from other cargo vessels and have a minimum of a half a mile from other sailing vessels. This is my experience. Make up your own rules, but clearly agree. We also agree to pass cargo vessels astern, never in front of them. If something would happen, even if you're motoring and something would happen with the engine and you thought of passing the cargo vessel across his bow, if something would happen with the engine, or if you're on the sail and the wind changes or the wind drops, maybe what you had in mind of a safe crossing across the bow of a cargo vessel might not work out. So I prefer to pass cargo vessels astern. Also agree on how we will pass fishing vessels. Figure out how we're going to figure out how they are fishing. And based on what we think they're doing in terms of fishing and the movement that we see on IS, agree how we will pass fishing vessels. So my preference is always cross well in front of a fishing vessel, because behind you never know really what they're trawling. But also, be it for fishing vessels or be it for cargo vessels, don't hesitate to call them on VHF. I think it was also Linda that mentioned it. Just use the radio. Even if it is just to verify that they have seen you on IS and that they are alert. It helps to speak, if you can, in the local language. And it definitely helps also, as Linda has mentioned, to use a female voice. Female voices get much more response than a male voice on the radio. Super important in terms of, again, agreeing with the crew is to monitor the wear and tear on the boat. This is a close-up picture for those of you who have participated in our first webinar. We were talking about this. This is a close-up from a gooseneck. we were sailing a boat from a friend of mine. He had just bought the boat, and the boat was fully inspected pre-sale by a certified inspector. But one of the things that the inspector had not seen is that the bolt of the gooseneck was not a proper bolt. So at a certain point, we were sailing, and there was a nut that fell off on deck, and it was a pretty big nut. You know, rule of thumb is the bigger the nut, the more important the nut is. But it was also not just a nut, it was a nylock nut. So it is typically a nut which is not supposed to fall off. So we looked over the boat, and we found that actually it was the nut of the gooseneck. What had happened is that the bolt that went through the gooseneck was a fully threaded bolt. It had been there probably forever. But as time went by, that bolt with the fully threaded bolt had been filing in the hole that goes through the gooseneck and the counterholster upholstery from the mast, and had filed an egg shape, a hole in the gooseneck. So as there was more friction and as there was more movement, gradually the nut fell off. And we almost lost in full sails and in pretty heavy seas, we almost lost the bolt, which was wriggling itself off. So monitor the wear and tear on the boat. Again, my golden rule is when you're on watch, when you're on a boat, you listen, you look, and you feel. If you hear a noise which wasn't there before, typically it's a sign something is different and possibly is wrong. If you look at the boat and you see that the vang or one of the standing rigging or the running rigging is not really looking like it was the day before, typically something is different, and most of the time something is wrong. But also feel the boat. You know, if the boat heels much more than before, if the boat feels like it is under stress, it's a sign something is wrong. Our rule is always the sunrise watch duty does a tour of the boat and the bow. So we typically look at chafing of the running rigging. We look for any possible bits on deck, bits that might have fallen off of the boat of the rigging. We check for bits flapping, like many of us use lazy backs, but the lazy back that is not properly fixed and is flapping around for days and days on end, at the end will ruin your lazy back. And we do a check on the standing rigging, see if all the split pins are still in there, if there is any movement on the standing rigging, etc., etc. We also, in the sunrise watch, as we do the boat tour, we do check if there's any flying fish. You'll have plenty of flying fish on deck. We clear of the flying fish, we clear of any possible weed or squid that we find on deck because it will start stinking. And even worse, you know, if we walk on deck and, you know, we have flying fish or weed or squid everywhere, you will skid and you might possibly fall. The morning sunrise watch duty also typically rinses or cleanses the cockpit windows and the solar panels. As you probably know, the solar panels get spray on them. It dries off, it becomes salt, and after a couple of days of passage, it will form a little layer that will filter off the sunlight, and your solar panels will produce far less. Lots of rules in here. Agreements on weather predictions. To me, we download once per day. We agree who will download, whether it's a first mate, a skipper, or one of the crew. We brief on the crew what the routing of the boat will be for the next 24 hours. We discuss the weather, the sailing plan, possible issues that we see coming up. You know, is there possibility for squalls? Is there possibility for rain? Are the waves going to change angle? Make sure that your crew is properly briefed. Make sure before the night sets in that you have an agreed sail plan. And for me, this is all part of proper planning and proper sailing. Don't just go in the night with just, by default, the sails that you used during the whole day. You know, during night, it's more difficult to work on deck. It's more challenging. It's, you know, it becomes a safety issue working on deck, especially if you have big seas. So we might agree on a more conservative sail plan. Do we agree before the night sets in? If the wind picks up and if we have squalls coming up, what we will do? How will we reef? At what wind speeds will we start reefing? If you fly spinnakers, as of what speed will we start wind speed? Will we start dosing the spinnaker? We're going a little bit away from safety, and this is also related to having short fuses, but it's also related to safety. On a boat, everything lives somewhere. Everything has its place and stays there. And this is particularly critical in terms of emergencies. We have a knife on deck. If we need to cut some of the running rigging in the case of an emergency, if we have always a flashlight, make sure that stuff stays in there and stays in its home. It's really frustrating when things get really, I wouldn't say necessarily in an emergency, but when things get stressy, to have to look for your basic equipment. It always lived there. How come it is no longer there? But also in that respect, if you come on a boat as a crew, respect that the boat for the skipper and his or her family is their home. So it's already somewhere a stress level to bring other people into their home, which is as small as a living room. Add a little kitchen and a little bathroom, but still it's a very confined space. But if on top of that you have gas crew coming in and things keep on moving around, it gets really frustrating. So for me, it's a basic sign of respect that if you take something from somewhere, put it back there. Sleep deprivation. I think this is one of the real challenges. For me, sleep deprivation is a major problem. Not only because with lack of sleep, fuses will get shorter, but also it's a safety issue. With well-rested crew, everybody is at their, maybe not the 100%, but the 95%. And it's really important, crucial to me in terms of crew dynamics. A well-rested crew and a well-fed crew, to me, is a happy crew. So try to avoid that sleep deprivation creeping in slowly and those fuses amongst the crew or amongst your family, getting shorter. Again, it's one more reason to agree who is on watch and who is on standby. So that the ones who are sleeping are confident that the watch is in control and they know if something is happening and hands on deck are being called for, that they will be called for. And the one who is on watch will not take any risks. And there's also one more reason to agree when to wake up the skipper. Again, with gas crew, agree on forehand which cost will be shared, and that depends boat per boat. But make sure that everybody agrees what costs will be shared. For us, we actually use an app like TriCount for the cost of a shared cost. If we have crew dinners, provisioning, because sometimes we have a drink with 2 crew and Mr. X is paying, and then we have a lunch with 3 other crew and Mrs. Y is paying. It's pretty difficult to keep track of all of that. So we use TriCount that balances nicely, keeps track of who has paid for which crew. And then at the end, it's very easy to settle the balance. Talking about settling balances, make sure that the crew, that's my advice, settles the cost sharing before they leave the boat. We had a very unhappy incident. I think it was 3 years ago, where we all agreed on forehand, what the costs would be to share. And it was a boat where we also shared the fuel, the marina costs, and a cost shared in the insurance of the boat. So in the end, it was quite a high amount that we cost shared. And 2 of the crew left the boat and never paid a share. And that leaves an absolutely bad taste. I wasn't the skipper on that boat. If I was a skipper, they wouldn't have left the boat unless they settled the account. But agree on forehand that they will settle their accounts before they leave the boat. And in terms of cost, make sure that the use of Starlink, which can be a major cost, is agreed on beforehand. How to use Starlink, how we will cost share on the devices that are linked to Starlink. Make sure that you switch Wi-Fi off when not in use. Switch off all of the auto upgrades and the background refreshes, etc., etc. No video, minimum use only. So in the past passages from Europe down to the Caribbean. So this is over, including stopovers in Cabo Verde. We typically racked up a cost of around $200 per crew in the shared cost. But we made sure that the usage was well agreed upon and there was no misuse. But do use Starlink. I mean, do use the connectivity. For me, you know, shared joy is double joy. And I think also Sue mentioned this. Shared pain is half a pain. So do share with other people in the flotilla, share with your friends, with your family, share your experience, because your friends and your family will be worried about you. You know, share them on a daily. I keep a tracking on PredictWind. You can also do the tracking on the blog post, little snippets, little pictures on Noforeignland, and they love that. It's also, you know, it makes me happier to know that my friends and my family are informed and they are not worried about me. Cooking. Again, something to agree on beforehand. Cooking on a passage is a challenge, and don't forget that it is a challenge most of the days. Agree on beforehand on the cooking schedule. Will you do one main meal per day? When would that be? My preference is to have one main meal served about 1 hour before sunset. So typically then all of the crew gets in there. We also use that opportunity to do a briefing of the upcoming weather, the sail plan before the sunsets, and you know, we enjoy the sunset together. Agree who will cook, what the rotation schedule is. I had boats where there was one specific person did all of the cooking, or we have a rotating mother watch, one watch which is taking out of the sail schedule that does the cooking for a day. But also, I would definitely advise, and I think it was Sue who also mentioned this, or it was Julian, if you have a freezer, pre-cook some meals for the rough days. It makes life so much easier. There are days where it is just a physical challenge to cook because the vegetables are running everywhere, all of the utensils are just moving left and right. You will have rough days. And I do a lot of ocean passages, but there are even some days where I just stand in the galley cursing. So if you have a freezer, pre-cook some meals where the main ingredients are all in there, you actually put it on a pot, put it on the stove, put it on a small burner, and just let it defrost as it is there. The only thing to add is either pasta or noodles or some cereals or some potatoes, and that's a full meal. Agree also on what is the breakfast and the lunch protocol. If you agree that there would only be one main meal per day in the evening, then if crew wakes up and they make their own breakfast and the lunch, you know, what is the cooking protocol? You know, for me, if you cook for yourself only, or you cook for those on deck and those who are awake, it's a little effort. If I make a sandwich for myself, or I ask the others which are on deck, which are awake, if they also want to have a sandwich, or I cook some eggs or something, you know, it helps with the crew dynamic and it makes a positive dynamic to make that habit. It's quite frustrating if you're in your watch and you had a rough night and you're going into the sunrise, the next watch is coming up, and you can smell them cooking for themselves. They're baking eggs and sausages and baked beans and tomato sauce. And then they come on deck ready for their watch, you know, with their full meal, and you're sitting there, you know, and you had just a rough night. You know, look around, be sociable on the boat, and cook also for those which are awake and on deck. A tip that I liked, something that I learned in one of my previous passages, is to have a provisions master. We work with perishable vegetables and fruit. Some of the boats we don't have a freezer, so we only have either a cooling box or a fridge. There's always something that needs to be used first before it goes off. you know, throwing overboard spoiled food is really a waste of resources. So for us, even if I'm cooking, I go to my provisions master and say, okay, what do you have that is about to go off that I need to use first? And then I make my meal based on those ingredients. Another tip is to use a small map on where to find your provisions. You know, typically provisions are stowed everywhere in the boat, and we buy a lot of provisions. I think it was Sue. They also gave the tip, you know, stow your boat full in the Canaries. So this means that a lot of our bilges or storage areas are full. We stow the provisions in a systematic way, and we keep a little schematic of where you can find the sauces, where you can find the pasta, where you can find the noodles, where you can find the sauces, where you can find the canned vegetables, the canned fruits, the milk, the soda, etc., etc., and keep things in place. Don't take out, you know, two cans of tomato sauce, and in the end you're only using one, and then you put the other one no matter where. It really reduces the time and the effort spent when preparing meals. All right. But again, you know, I gave you a lot of rules, and don't forget, this came from my bias and working with teams at work, working in harsh environments, in security, in insecure areas, in unsafe areas. So bear with me, you know, being a stickler on dynamics in a team, good dynamics, keeping good dynamics in a team. And being safe in a passage. But share also, if you're magical, share also those magical moments with your crew, with your flotilla, with your onshore friends and family. And, you know, I like to keep a fun logbook. You know, we have the official logbook, and then we have one sheet where every watch is noting down fun stuff. Other yachts that we have crossed, you know, what was the name of the yacht? Who did we talk to? Where were they from? What was the name of the crew? Because there's a good chance that you will cross them again. Some fun incidents that happened. Hey, a flying fish hit me in the face last night. It's a cool thing to share the magic with the rest of the crew. And people might actually use it, you know, to also put on their Facebook as they're doing the passage. We also have a sheet with a fun competition. So we have a number of rows where we log who has seen whales, who has seen dolphins, how many shooting stars have we seen, how many International Space Station flyovers have we seen, the amount of flying fish collected in the morning. We keep a fun log on the wreckage speed that we've done, or the lowest speed that we've done under sail, the record miles that we covered in 24 hours, or the lowest amount of miles that we covered in the last 24 hours. Share it with the crew. It helps building that experience. Voila, we've come towards the end of my part. Let me ask the panel to unmute video and their audio, because I will have some questions also for them. Let me just stop my share, if I can. It doesn't let me stop my share. I'll leave it like that. All right. We have a number of questions that were collected in the group on forehand. I will pitch them to my panel, to Linda, Gillian, and Sue, and see what their experience is. Don't hesitate. If you lock the question or you want to have follow-up questions, just unmute and chime in. We're now in the free flow part of this webinar. Okay, this is how I stop my share. There we go. The first one is the use of a logbook. I'll pitch it to you first, Linda. Do you use a logbook?
We do use a logbook. We make an entry every 6 hours. We use UTC as the time that we record. I thought you made some very good points about it. One of the things is, I think because there's only two of us on board, the communication is much easier. But one of the things that I think is very valuable about the logbook, it is a point of reference at any given point in time. And if things go haywire for whatever reason, and we had the experience where our heading sensor died, and the boat went black, absolutely black. Nothing was working at all. And it was really quite a surprise to suddenly be, as it were, with blindfolded. But the benefit of the logbook, of course, is that it was the last heading that we were on. It was the speed that we were on. It had all the, all of the details that we needed to refer to. So we record engine hours in there. We record the water temperature just because we're interested in it, but certainly the wind. What else do we record? Yeah, the course over ground, the speed over ground, and so forth. So, and look, when we finally retire from sailing, I think we'll be taking it with us and saying, gosh, do you remember when we were back in wherever? There's that history as well. So it's a very useful thing. Yes, we're religious about it. So
Can I just add in there, we also had one of our crew member had a digital logbook, which was terrific. And we also have our written in book. But friends actually struck a dead whale on their crossing, which damaged their rudder. Yeah, they were fine, but their insurance company actually wanted a copy of their logbook of all the details of where they were and when they struck. So it is an important thing to record.
Yeah, somebody in the chat just said there are insurance companies that require a written logbook to be maintained. Yeah. Yeah, very good. Gillian, did you keep a logbook or a fun logbook with the kids?
We definitely kept a fun logbook with the kids, and we kept a spreadsheet logbook for all the boat details.
Okay. I had boats where they didn't keep a logbook. I had boats where there was a log entry every hour. Typically, I like the end of the watch. It's almost like a debrief of the watch. I like indeed a track. It helps also the new watch coming up to see a little bit of the history. Is the wind coming up? Is the wind? Are the waves changing? Is the sea state changing? Yeah, I agree. What costs are usually shared with guest crew? Who of the panel wants to talk a little bit about that?
Well, I can't really comment because we don't have a crew.
So we did have two crew. We decided that we were very grateful for the two people to come with us. They paid for their flights to join us, but we pretty much provided all the food and all the costs. But when we went out, when we were in Las Palmas, Mindelo, and when we arrived, when we went out, they paid for our restaurants and drinks most of the time. So that worked for us.
Yeah. I think it's one point which is important in there is to agree on forehand. I've been on different boats with different arrangements. One boat, because shared, I said in the presentation, because shared the marina cost, the fuel cost, we cost shared in the insurance cost. Other boats, we would only cost share in the provisions, and not fuel, not marina fees, blah, blah, blah. But it's important to just agree on forehand.
Yeah. Absolutely. I think the use of your Starlink is an important point you made, Peter, and that's something we will do with our next crossing. We'll have an agreement for the use of Starlink and who's going to contribute to that.
Yeah. It can be a major cost if it is misused. If somebody is not aware and starts streaming videos when they're off watch, starts streaming videos, the cost is per gigabyte, is per usage, and it will rack up. Yeah.
Yep, absolutely.
Another question. What are the main challenges for a skipper having guest crew on board? Like living in a one bedroom apartment with people in his living room 24/7. or is it the pressure of responsibility, the lack of sufficient sleep? What can you guys share on that?
Well, again, I'll jump in here. Our challenge was that one of our crew members was not a native English speaker, and we're obviously Australian. 3 of us were from Australia, and we actually speak Australian, which we often joke about. And his English was very good. He's a German fellow, but when we were in a stressful situation, wasn't too stressful, we really found that the language barrier became an issue. So I think that's something to just be aware of, what languages you are speaking, and that you're consistent with your messaging. So that would be my tip.
Yeah. Anybody else from the panel wants to share some experiences? What they feel as the main, what are the main challenges for a skipper? Yeah, for me, and it's something to be aware of when we're sailing with somebody else who's a skipper, and definitely as a guest crew. I do not underestimate what it means for a skipper. And again, most of the work that I do is mentoring people that have never done ocean passages before, so come in typically as the first mate or a guest crew or a trainer or a mentor, and I can see firsthand that it's not just the logistics and having prepared the boat for X number of years and having dreamt of that moment, but it is a fear of the unknown. So to me, what is really important as crew or as first mate, altogether we can try to offload the pressure of tasks of the skipper. I think it's one of the chats that we had here on Finding Dory, where one person says, you know, in the crew, in the watch list, the skipper is actually out of the watch system. You know, he can, because things will break on the boat, or things will need to be fixed, or there are certain things that will need to be done. They will need his or her attention. And then on top of that, doing also the full watch schedule might not really be beneficial for him, you know, in terms of, you know, lack of sleep, the amount of efforts, etc., etc. So I think and even if it is not that, just the feeling of responsibility for his or her boat, for his or her crew, is not to be underestimated. That's why typically for an open ocean passage, I don't want to be skipper. I do my best to try to relieve the work of the skipper and make sure it is also a magical passage for him or for her. But it is quite a bit of pressure. If there's anybody else that wants to chime in, just unmute and you know, bring your perspective in there. This is an open discussion that we're having at the moment. Likewise okay, what are the key challenges for a guest crew joining on the boat? Panel, any shared experiences?
No.
You always sail with the family. You need to go for a new challenge, you know, and get like
some crew.
Gillian, you need to get some crew, you know.
Yeah, I think you'd have to ask people who've been crew, because, you know, I guess their challenges were living with us in a small space. We didn't know them all both particularly that well. So we did get along very, very well though. So, you know, I think you need to be very understanding of each other and each other's space. So, yeah.
Yeah. And also it's a bit of a step of the unknown, huh? I mean, I manage a couple of Facebook groups for Noforeignland for passages, and there's loads of hitchhikers who are putting themselves up as volunteers to crew on a boat. But God bless them, because they very often underestimate what it is to step into somebody else's home, but also very often underestimate the possible issues. I've been on boats which are super well managed. I've been on boats which were not managed at all. I've been on boats where everything was super organized. We had checklists of everything. I have other boats where, you know, I almost had to twist the arm of the skipper to give the crew a safety briefing, a basic safety briefing, or a briefing of the equipment. And it was a complicated boat. And then on top of that, definitely, if you are a female guest crew coming on the boat, it might be a particular challenge. There's been some instances where we've seen issues with female crew versus, and typically these are single skippers, male skippers. And people come in there with the best of intentions, and then find themselves in a precarious situation. While you're on passage, there's no way of stepping off the boat anymore, and that's the challenge. And if you guys chime in and you have heard of experiences of other boats that have been in your flotilla on challenges of guests, chime in.
Peter, I might just add.
Yep.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah,
I might
go
just
ahead,
add there. I
Linda.
think there are two kind of overarching principles. I think one is the managing expectations, and as you said, in your presentation very clearly, that is terribly important, because if the expectations are not aligned, then things are going to go awry. But the other thing is that ocean sailing is not for passengers. It's I mean, we've had friends who have either asked to come or something, and I think they have an idea that you get on the boat, you sit in the cockpit, the weather will be always predictable, the sea will be flat, the Mediterranean is great. It's totally unrealistic, and I think that's something that is incredibly important, whether the crew is whether they're friends or whether they're people that you don't know at all. I think being able to describe the importance of not being a passenger in any way, I think that's, everybody has a role to play.
Yeah,
Right.
and define what the role is, and yeah. There was somebody else who wanted to come in. Did I hear somebody? No. We're going on to kids. Sitting with kids. I think Julian will pitch this one to you. If you'd have to do it again, would you take a guest crew on board, either as a nanny or to help you with the sailing?
We have talked about it, and I don't think we will. So I'm pretty introverted, and so is my husband. So there's that aspect. And we're on an older monohull, so our living space is pretty cozy. We can't offer like a private cabin or like a private space at all to anybody else. And having 3 kids climbing over everyone and everything, like, I don't know. I suppose if I were 20 something, it wouldn't bother me, maybe, if I liked kids, but it doesn't, I don't know. It just doesn't feel like the best experience. I don't know. So to me, it doesn't. So no, I don't think we will. All to say, I think my kids are old enough, even last year at 8, 11, and 14, that they can mostly entertain themselves. They know how to play with each other. They're used to life on the boat. So like having a nanny or an au pair to just to entertain them feels unnecessary. We don't do school underway on long passages. And that's part of, like, we'll do the audiobooks or the podcasts and maybe sneak in we'll talk science and history or government or whatever, but they're not doing book work. Like, no one's trying to enforce that type of a thing, where an extra person just for the kids would be necessary. And so our boat, I mean, we double hand it fairly well. We get tired the first few days, but then we even out on our watches, and you get used to it. So I don't know. I think it was fine.
Yeah. I have to say, I mean, I have so much respect for Linda and her husband, who do 22,000 miles, double-handed. But I even have more respect for mom and dad with 3 kids doing an ocean crossing.
Yes.
This is, I can't imagine what it is, and coming out of it smiling is even to me is we had Sue sharing what the challenges are, but then on top of that having the responsibility of the kids. You're in open ocean with kids running around. You're always feeling 100% yourself, plus the cooking, plus the games, plus the sailing.
Yeah.
I'm tired after a passage, just being, an experienced crew, and I'm one of 4 or I'm one of 13 or 14. I'm not one dad, with a mom and then 3 kids in there, or total respect.
Yeah.
Thanks. Yeah.
Correct.
But everybody pitches in, and even like not necessarily watch standing, but like, but that's part of the lifestyle, and that's part of just how we've always kind of operated. Is everyone is pitching in, everyone is trying to work together. So I don't know. And when we spent 14 days at sea, we got to the Azores, and my daughter was like, I don't ever want to do that again. I'm never going on another overnight. Like, I'm done. I was like, well, we can't live here as beautiful as it is. So, but okay. But we spent a month around the archipelago, and by the time a month had passed and we had lots of land time, she was like, all right, I'm ready to move on. So, letting them voice themselves and work through that, I think, is important. So.
And how are they looking forward to the next passage now, Julian?
I'm sorry, say again.
How are they looking forward to the next passage? They're now going again for a long passage?
It's a little bittersweet. I think we thought we would spend a little more time in the Med, so they were just circumstances are what they are. So they're a little bittersweet about that. But I think no one is complaining about it or sad about it. We've had a lot of conversations, so I think everyone kind of knows what to expect, and we're really excited to visit the Canaries and Cape Verde. And also the Caribbean was our playing ground for 2 years, so we have some expectations of there's going to be kid boats and what we can do, and that's actually surprisingly they're excited about that. Like, we like the new in the novel, but
they're excited about
I know, but like, we like the new in the novel, but like that idea of we already know what to expect, and we know that anchorages are good, and we know like that the sea life is going to be great, and we're excited about that. So
yeah. And typically east-west passage is slightly better predictable. So I think we expect we know more what to expect. Less chance of rough weather. So yeah.
that's what everyone says. So that's what I'm hoping for, because we had quite a
knock
couple.
on wood, knock on wood, knock on wood. Everybody, knock on wood.
Yeah.
All right. A question. I understand there are magical moments, but how much can you really relax? What were the most stressful moments? And even if there are no stressful moments, can you ever relax? To the panel.
My husband just said to me the most stressful moment for him was tying up in the marina when we arrived. We were in a small space and it was a bit stressful. I mean, I would say when the squalls come, so long as you prepare and you know, everyone knows what you're doing, you're reefing, I'd say that would have been the most stressful moments for us. Our crew loved it. The sailing conditions for us were fantastic. So yeah, that would be it for me.
Yeah, and we had squalls in our passage. So we had squalls very early on. Already, was it the third day out of Cabo Verde? The squalls came, which was very, very unusual.
Yeah, our highest wind recorded was 46 knots in a gust. So, but I mean, you hardly felt it. Honestly, I wouldn't be afraid of the squalls. Just know what you're looking for and prepare for them.
Yeah, prepare and prepare also in terms of the sail plan. I don't know if you remember, Sue, most of the squalls were like late night and early morning, no?
Yes, yeah. Pretty much. The last one was as we were coming in the daytime, though, wasn't it? And that was our worst one. Was close. I think we did 17 knots down a wave. Yeah, mostly the nights and the morning. So yeah, make sure you teach your crew what to look out for. Looking in the sky as well as watching the stars disappear, knowing something's coming at you, as well as your radar if you have. So
yeah, and even during the day, huh? That's again for me one of the things in being on watch. I hate it when I come on deck and I see somebody who kept his previous watch, the watch before me, you know, with his earphones in, reading a book, sitting, looking backwards, not paying any attention. You know, to me, look, feel, and listen to the boat is so super important. For the rest of the panel, in terms of, you know, what were the most stressful moments? And are you ever relaxed in a passage? Over the rest of the panel.
Well, Gillian, you go. I would say it is possible to be relaxed, absolutely, on a passage, and it depends perhaps on how long the passage actually is. But there is no passage, I'm sure, where the weather is bad all the time or the weather is good all the time. So I think leaning into that reality that you're going to be up and down is it is comforting in itself, because you do know that you're going to be prepared for the unexpected, I guess. I mean, we read somewhere, and we've sort of taken it on board, the time to reef is when the first person thinks that you should reef, not afterwards. And I also take on board Peter's comments very, very seriously about listening to the boat. We are always listening to the boat. And I remember one occasion in particular, Tony was on watch. I was kind of asleep in a forward bunk. I heard the sound of the water on the hull change. I wasn't really asleep, but I could sense something was in the process of changing. And within about 15 minutes, we had over 50 knots. And it just, I came up on deck. What's happening, Tone? What's, you know, we knew things were going to change very quickly, and it went from maybe 15 knots, 20 knots, 35 knots, 42 knots, over 50 knots. Water over the companionway, water down the companionway, water in the electrical box, everything going bizarre, you know, berserk. And you know that it's going to end. I mean, we just went down below and went, oh, shit. You know, we'll just wait until it goes, because there was nothing we could do. We already had 2 reefs in the main. We couldn't have put a 3rd reef in the main. We couldn't go outside. But I think also taking Peter's point, because that moment happened so quickly, perhaps we were not as prepared as we could have been. We could have put the storm boards into the companionway. We could have had life jackets on, which we didn't have on, because everything was fine 15 minutes earlier. Yeah, so, but I think an important thing about enjoying a passage is that one does need to know how to relax and lean into it. And the likelihood is that everything will be fine. And you just have to go with that.
Everything will be fine. The famous last words.
Well, there's no point being a pessimist about it.
Yeah, for sure.
You know, I think having a positive attitude, being, you know, coming back to that thing of being grateful that it is so extraordinary being out on the sea, that if you enjoy every moment that you can possibly enjoy, and then flex your muscles when you really need to be involved physically. I mean, I lie about my height. I'm not quite 5 feet tall. I weigh about 42 kilos, and there's only 2 of us on board. So there's things that I cannot do physically. So we have to organize our life to make it reasonable enough to be able to manage the boat. And we do.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, very good. Gillian?
We definitely had some squalls. The squalls are stressful. And we both, our landfalls into Bermuda and the Azores, we were trying to beat a low system in where we had really big waves. We were trying to beat one in, so we had full sails up, even though typically we would reef because our weather router was like, you really need to get in before this hits. But then we got close enough that we were like, it just, conditions deteriorated enough that we had to reef, and we had broken a car on the mainsail. So then we couldn't reef. We had to point into the wind. We had to point into the waves. Like it just, and then there's water going over the deck. Like it was a very scary moment for me. And then it was fine. We got into the channel through Bermuda, and it was just a mill pond. Like you couldn't even tell that it was raging outside. And I just take a deep breath. But I think that, you have those low moments, but then it makes you appreciate the really beautiful ones even more. And we had beautiful spinnaker sailing weather for days. And it was super magical. And I think it would have been magical if we hadn't had squalls, but it was even better because we knew what else it could have been. Does that make sense? And I think that, so the squalls, and when things break, it's stressful. And we haven't had a ton of breakage, but the sail car breaking so that we couldn't pull the sail down while still, we had to point into the wind. And so that was like, that type of breakage was stressful. Sorry, I'm losing my words. But yeah, I agree with what Linda and Sue said. And those beautiful moments are just even better.
I have a new motto, which is there is always a solution. We might not know what it is right now, but there is always a solution and a way to work around whatever is happening and going on. So that's how I'm living at the moment when stuff goes wrong.
That's a good motto.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Always.
I would also add.
Yeah, go ahead, Linda.
Sorry, I was just going to say that from time to time, we've decided to heave too. And I think it's a greatly under recognized thing that one can do to give yourself a break if things get tough. And you can just sit tight out there. The boat just calms itself down. It will ride over the waves. And you can just, I suppose, take some time to reflect on what's going on without actually thinking that you've got to plow forward all the time. I mean, it doesn't always work, but when it does, I think it's something that, you can always fall back on it as a safety thing. Give yourself a break.
Absolutely.
It's.
Yeah. My experience is I can completely tune out. We're talking almost like the LSD campaign back in the 1970s. What was it called again? Tune in and drop out. That was funny. But I can completely tune out or drop out. But there's always, like in a computer, like a sub-process in my mind, and I'm always listening. I'm always somewhere subconsciously looking or feeling the boat. Wary that at any given moment something can go wrong. It's not that I'm a pessimistic, not at all. I'm a very optimistic person, but it's like totally feeling in tune with the boat, and feeling this is relaxing me from my job, my normal job, and totally appreciating it. But then I always tend to be somewhere wary at its minimum level. It's like a sub-process that is always in there. I'm very sensitive to this boat doesn't feel right, or it's almost like my sixth sense. And I wrote a couple of blog posts about my sixth sense. This doesn't feel right. But that's a bit my experience. Moving on to the next question. Isn't it boring? My panel.
I've got to say, absolutely never boring. I can't believe, and Peter and I had a bit of a brief discussion before this panel on that question. There is always so much to do and so much to learn. And the time, apart from when you have 3 children, Gillian, which is a different story altogether, but, the opportunity that one has to reflect, to learn to think about the world, to tune out. You can't use Starlink all the time, so you've got to, you know, read books, perhaps fill your life with your hobby or other things. It's just such a wonderful time to be out, away from, you know, away from bureaucracies or politics, or whatever it might be in daily life. No, the answer is, I would say for me anyway, I am never, ever, ever bored on the boat. Never. Yeah.
Yeah. And Julian, you
Others?
said yes.
I mean,
Julian.
I agree with what Linda said, completely. And I'm good to be with my thoughts, or to have a book and that's it, and watch the waves and search for dolphins. And I mean, I can watch Portuguese man o' war on the surface for hours. It just, but after a few days, I do get a little antsy, like, okay, well, and probably the kids are a factor, because I'm still having to parent. I don't get to tune them out like I do the news, you know? So it's, I don't know. I mean, yeah. So there are moments where it's like, okay, I'm ready for the next thing, but
Yeah. Sue?
If we're referring to the crossing, so the longer passage, I would have loved to have felt bored. I just felt overstimulated, so I didn't. You know, I would have loved to do all the things I wanted to do, and then get bored with, you know, I had some craft, I had some baking, all that stuff that I just didn't get to do. So, so no, I wouldn't get bored. If the conditions are beautiful, it's just lovely. Just, yeah, it's just, it is magical.
Yeah, indeed, and it's a particular challenge. I think what you talked about, sailing on a catamaran, no? And the next webinar we will talk about this. You talked about the slamming and the continuous slamming and the noise and feeling, you know, the boat. You mentioned that you never felt unsafe, but you know, the pressure of the waves on the boat and on how they call it, the horizontal platform, pushing the boat up. It's a bit of a challenge, no?
Yes, definitely was for us. But like I said, our crew actually enjoyed it. You know, they were in their element, just sitting up at the helm smiling. It was me personally that struggled. So yeah. But the slamming, everyone was jolted with the slamming, and we hadn't heard that before to that extent. In our passages, like I think it was 7 days down to Cape Verde, 5 days to Mindelo, Las Palmas, sorry. And yeah, we hadn't had that slamming on either of those bigger passages, so it was something else.
Yeah. We'll talk about this in the next
good.
webinar. Yeah. Talking about sleep deprivation, and maybe I overstressed, I don't know, the importance of having proper sleep. Magical formulas that you would have of making sure you have a good sleep. The panel, your experiences.
Well, I think if I can jump in, find the comfiest bunk, and put yourself there, surrounded by pillows, which is not always easy if all your bunks are already taken. I agree completely. But because there's only 2 of us, we make sure that we sleep during the day as well as, you know, in alternate watches, and we're very accommodating of each other's needs. So if we agree on 3-hour watches, but one is tired, then we can easily be flexible and accommodate, you know, an extra hour or whatever it is. Sleep is terribly important, but I don't recall actually feeling really, really sleep deprived. I think it works, but you've got to find a place where you can sleep. Don't just think that you can sleep in a double bunk, regardless of the, you know, the tack that you're on, or, you know, regardless of the weather. You need to find somewhere where you can really cuddle down, I guess.
Yeah, Julian or Sue, and anything to add? Your secret formulas of being able to find proper sleep?
I definitely agree with what Linda said, and getting comfy. I have an extra cushion that I put out for myself that nobody else needs, but they use. I can't use a sleep mask, but I take a t-shirt to put over my eyes in the day to block out the light. And the settee that I typically sleep on has a fan, which I love. I love to have a fan when I'm sleeping, but especially when it was warmer out, it was in my face and it dried out my eyes. So even during the day I would use, or at night I would use it.
Yeah.
I might put an earbud in and listen to a really boring audiobook. I happen to have a 30 minutes, like, this is the history of mathematics, which is actually quite fascinating, but his voice is really smooth and slow. And I never make it to the end. I fall asleep. I also kind of, if it's rough out and I'm feeling not my best, maybe a little queasy, I try to find my inner happy place. I picture I'm floating in a really calm pond in the forest, and I just really slow my breathing down and kind of meditate and focus on that. And it just helps, like laying down, it just helps me relax from the anxiety that I'm feeling. And so that really helps. My husband has trouble sleeping during the day, especially as we get started. So if I can get him to sleep more, I'm happy to stand watch longer. And we have an agreement that if it's fairly clear, like, middle of the ocean, we can set a 15-minute timer and lay down. And then when the timer goes off, it wakes us up. We do our look around. So after a few days, we both settle out fairly well, where we can do about 4 hours on, 4 hours off. And it's not so bad, but those first couple of days are tricky sometimes. So, and making sure that he gets rest is important to me, because if something mechanical breaks, I need his brain to be functional, more so than mine.
We were fortunate because we had the 2 extra crew. So they did, the 3 boys did the night watches, and 3 hours each. So they got a 6-hour off break. And then during the day, we just all, sat at the helm as we wanted. If someone was tired, they would go and sleep, and always making sure someone was at the helm. But I think having the 2 extra crew is where that really helps.
That sounds dreamy. Yeah.
Yeah, it would be dreamy for you guys. Yeah.
It might be related also to another question that we had. Any tips that you would have on crossing shorthanded? Shorthanded, I would assume, with 2 people. Anything special to pay attention to, especially for night watches? Any tips shorthanded? I think both Julian and Linda have sailed shorthanded. What can you share?
I think, sorry. You go, Gillian.
I would what you said earlier in your slides about we wear PFDs at night, we're clipped into the cockpit at night. And I mean, we're in a center cockpit, so we very easily feel like we're safe, but if one of us has to go up deck, we have to wake the other one up. That's not negotiable. When we turn over, we're just really thorough. I mean, yeah, we write things down, but we're thorough in a way where we communicate back and forth, so that we both know what's going on, and that he knows that I understand, and I know that he understands. So.
Yeah, Linda?
I agree. I think the communication is the most important thing, and understanding that you do things together rather than singly. So, I mean, we have similar rules, never go out of the cockpit and what have you. But we always fully brief each other on what's been going on as we change watch, shipping. We talk about what's anything on the radar or anything on, whatever the chart and so forth. But I think there's a really good side to being shorthanded as well. And that is, like I said, when I was giving the presentation earlier, there's a degree of empathy that you can develop with your partner and in the threesome with your boat. And it's probably something that can't really be generated as easily with a guest crew or with a crew that you don't really know. For us, having been together for so many years, more than 40 years, we can read each other's minds almost. But the other thing is that our procedures on board are nailed and tried and tested over and over and over. And we make sure that we communicate. I mean, for example, we have our engine under the saloon floor. If Tony has to go into the engine room, he tells me engine room open. I say engine room open. And it might sound pedantic, but that's the way we do it. When we, if we're tacking or jibing or whatever it might be, every single action that we take is completed before we start the next one. So we never start anything with a whole mass of sheets lying all over the deck or whatever it might be. We clean them all up, put that away. If we reef, we clean up the reefing lines, put them away. So we make sure that because there's only two of us, we don't have flipping sheets tangled around our ankles or, whatever it might be. And even though we're pedantic about saying, are you ready? Yes, I'm ready to do whatever it might be. It might be if we're, I don't know, say reefing or something, whatever it might be, we check on the other person. Are you right to go? No, I'm not. Just hang on. I've got the sheets wrapped around my feet, so, but it's that kind of pedantry, that kind of adherence to procedures, as Peter was saying about the safety aspect, that is the most important thing, I think, when there's only two of you. You read lots of stories about people having accidents. There might be 4 people on board. One person has an accident, 2 people had an accident. The remaining crew are able to maneuver the boat. When there's only 2 of you, what can the other person do if something goes wrong? And I think that is the most important thing. If you're an inexperienced partner, wife, do you know how to turn the engine on and off? Do you know how to turn the boat around? Do you know how to drop the sail? Do you know how to make a radio call? All of those things are worth double checking. So when you're sitting there wondering, how am I going to talk to this person again? Just say, let's go over X, Y, Z things so we know we've got it clear. So communication and partnership is, critical. It's a threesome.
We do the same thing. We do the same thing
in the boat. Yeah.
Repeat back commands like that. And I think that's really clear, because then there's no question. You said something else. I'm sorry. I forgot. It'll come to me. But yeah, no, I agree. We do the same thing.
We use our headsets a lot. It's not just when we're docking or anchoring. We use our headsets if we're reefing, if we're bringing or putting out the code 0 and I can't exactly see him. We find they're really useful.
Yeah. We bought some headsets. I think it was Sena this year when we were sailing with my partner and with friends. It's such a game changer. And even more important, the bigger the boat.
Yes.
The bigger the, because you cannot necessarily see the person. They cannot necessarily hear you because they're busy at the bow and it's noisy at the bow. Even shouting or whistling, they wouldn't hear you. A lifesaver, not only a marriage saver, but also a lifesaver.
Yeah, absolutely.
I agree completely. Yeah, we use headsets for anchoring, and but we also have a procedure. We anchor where I want to anchor. So that's the procedure. But it is really good using the headsets, I've got to say, because again, with only 2 of us, and I think just going back to the original question, what do you do when there's only, you're shorthanded, and it's about thinking ahead and being prepared. So we've watched people come into marinas, and I'm not saying, we had to watch YouTube videos to learn how to come to tie up stern too, because in Australia, nobody ever does that. But we watch people who, there's maybe 2 or 3 people on the boat. They don't have their stern lines ready. They don't have their boat hooks ready. They don't, it's like you need to spend an hour or half an hour ahead of time making sure that you've got the boat ready for the next thing you have to do, especially when there's only 2 of you. So.
Yeah.
And we talk about like the what ifs too. Like we'll have, we're on this tack. So what happens if the wind shifts, or what happens if this happens? And just easy things like that, like the wind shifts, but also like, what if something bigger happened, like what would the procedure be? Talk me through that. If the steering failed, what would we do? How would we engage the emergency tiller? Like, and kind of talking through some more catastrophic things, like just, I don't know, kind of dinner conversation, or in the middle of the night when we're changing watches, whenever it, like when we think of it, it happens. But that way, both of our brains are thinking about the problem and thinking about what the solutions are. And this is where this tool is kept. And this is right, because I think that both of us having that awareness is important. And we trust our gut a lot. We will definitely be like, gut check, like, what does your intuition say? What does your gut say? Is this okay? Do we need to change this? And we always defer to on the safer side, because we want both of us to be comfortable. So
yeah, but it's true also when you sail with crew. I mean, safety first. God forgive, something happens, somebody gets hurt, it puts a real negative spin on the whole passage. All right, seasickness, magical formulas.
I've tried everything.
We tried everything.
I've tried everything.
Yep, same. Have you tried the patches?
I have tried the patches, and I love the patches. And last year, I had a really bad experience with the patch, and I was sick for days, so I don't use it anymore now. I had to take Zofran in order to like settle myself out. I couldn't. It was bad. So I switched to Sturgeon, and that was kind of always my short-term backup, and it worked fine. It works fine, but now, as of last year, I get really bad headaches with it. So I've now moved on to meclizine, and I take an anti-anxiety pill before passage, and I feel like there's definitely a physical component to seasickness, but like just taking the edge of my anxiety of worrying about the boat and the kids and everything, like it settles me, and I have a really great experience. So I have added that to my mix now.
Yeah. For me, having proper sleep is definitely contributive. I'm really lucky. I used to get really, really seasick on any boat when I was younger. And as I got older, I don't get seasick anymore. I can, cook a seafood dinner for 6 crew. I don't have a problem anymore. But having sailed with other crew who get seasick, for me, it would be have sufficient sleep, eat healthy, drink a lot of water, spend as much time topside as you can. And if you feel squeezy, even if it is your shift to cook, don't cook. Ask somebody else to take over. And try to avoid, bending over into the bilge or looking at books and charts down below. Definitely for the first days, try to avoid. And when you cook, try to vent the galley well. And of course, then the tablets and the patches for sure.
For me, it was to snack quite often. So to just make sure every 2 hours I had something, a rice cracker or something. And even when I woke up in the night, I would eat something. It looked my bed looked like I'd had rats in it because I had these rice cakes everywhere. I should have taken a photo because it was very funny. But I just would force myself to eat even though I didn't want to, and that helped a lot. So I think what you have to do is in the lead up to a big passage is test out different things and see how you respond to them, because the Sturgeon didn't work for me. I hallucinated on that. And I have another one, Travacalm, that I use that I like. And I take that automatically. Even if we're day sailing, I'll take a half every morning. And then the patches I find are really good. So you've just got to work out what works for you, really.
Yeah. Last question. Trash management. Tips on trash management.
Well, I hate garbage. I think, well, I mean, these are obvious things, but when you provision, unpack everything you possibly can. So I put flour into plastic jars, pasta into other jars. With our garbage, So we try not to take any cardboard on board or anything like that. Get rid of all the plastic that we can before we leave. But the other thing is I've got a few jars, and I try and big jars like this, like flower jars, and I try and compress all of the rubbish, not the putrescible rubbish, but we'll throw vegetable scraps over into the ocean, but all the other rubbish, compress it down and down and down, push it into these jars, and all of a sudden, you know, you've got a garbage bins full of garbage in something that's the size of maybe 2 liters. I don't know whether you know the size of the flower jars I'm talking about, but any sort of plastic container, and squash it down, compress it, and then all of a sudden you've got far less rubbish to deal with than what you would normally have, because it's like vacuum packed.
Yep.
And then you can get rid of it when you get to shore.
Yep, agree. That works really well.
Yeah.
And we'll
Yeah,
stiffer stuff will cut up into smaller bits and then shove into a container.
Yeah.
And
So definitely, you know, part of the preparation of the trip, as you take in provisions, is one thing. I agree. Then the second rule is anything which is food. When you prepare food, everything which is you know, vegetable or meat stuff, anything organic goes overboard. Do you guys keep cans and anything which is glass on board?
yeah, generally,
yes,
generally.
But we would shove anything soft plastic into those cans or into the bottles to fill them with the soft plastics, like Linda said.
Yeah, and maybe a tip would also be anything that you have to keep on board. Probably best to rinse it. You know,
absolutely.
if you have bags of cans and jars, anything which is remains of food in there, after 1 week or 2 weeks, will start reeking, or will get worms in it, or All right. We had lots of suggestions in the chat, but no further questions. We had a suggestion on power management. We can probably have a webinar based on that, but no further questions. With that, this has been the longest webinar so far. I thank you to share your experiences with us. Thanks also to everybody in the group to help preparing this webinar and giving your questions. I will look forward to see you for our 10th and last webinar in this series on sailing a multi-hull across the ocean. We have some really experienced multi-hull sailors lined up for you. So next week, Monday, we'll do the last webinar. Thank you again, Sammy, behind the scenes to help us out. Thank you also, Linda, Gillian, and Sue, of sharing your experiences. I loved this webinar, and I hope that we will meet in the Canaries. Thank you again, and wish you good night, everybody.
Yep. All the best, everyone.
Thank you, Peter.
Night.
Thank you.
Cheers, everybody.
Good night.
Cheers.
Bye.